My name is Sierra Ward, and today I am here interviewing Patti Criswell, who is a clinical social work therapist. I am partnering with the Southwest Michigan Journalism and Collaborative to have a conversation revolving around anxiety in adolescence. Patti is a recognized expert in the area of anxiety, relational aggression, and self-esteem. Her work includes individual and family therapy with girls and their parents, as well as working with adult women. Additionally, she is an instructor at Western Michigan University, where she teaches both grad and undergrad courses in the School of Social Work. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So our hope today is that this message reaches any young person, parent, student, or college student, or anyone else who is struggling with anxiety or depression. I want to say that you are loved and supported. And if you ever need to talk with someone about your mental health, know that that's a sign of strength. Life be lifing, okay? So today's mission is to educate and uplift. So let's get into the science of anxiety. Could you tell us a little bit about what anxiety is?
So it's the body's response to stress, which we need. Mm-hmm. I mean, if we see a bear in the woods, we need to have a chemical response. Mm-hmm. So when we think about anxiety, it's a beautiful thing. Thank goodness. Otherwise, we'd walk in front of cars. Thank goodness that we have that system built in. It becomes an anxiety disorder when it's no longer serving us. Mm-hmm. Our responses are misguided. They're exaggerated. They're irrational. And that's when there's this tipping point, and that's where it becomes problematic.
So a lot of times we hear about anxiety, and we're hearing a lot more now. Sometimes it's like a generational thing, like maybe your parents or your grandparents didn't really talk about it, but now it's a bit more accepted. So my question from you, from your professional standpoint, is anxiety worse now, or are we just now talking about it?
It's much worse. Yeah, there is no doubt. In all my years, I've seen a definite shift. It is so pervasive. Absolutely. So there's a whole lot of it. And it is being talked about more, for sure. Doesn't necessarily mean it's being treated, but it is being talked about more. And, there's concern, we're looking at why. Why is this generation so anxious? And I think we have some answers. So the hope is that through kind of education and figuring out, we can mitigate some of the things that are causing so much anxiety.
For sure.
Yeah.
That's really interesting, and we definitely are going to talk about some of those reasons as to why anxiety is higher now in adolescence. But for now, how can we ensure that anxiety doesn't drive our decision making? Because sometimes when we get anxious, it causes us to do things that we don't want to do, or it takes too much space in our life. How can we kind of keep hold of anxiety?
Yeah. So when you're in that anxious loop, let's say you've reached that tipping point, right? And it's it's not serving you anymore.
Yeah.
Right? We have to rely on the people we trust the most as resources to say that's not a rational thought. And then the other piece to that is, we can look even wider. We can look, I call it like the rule of the masses.
Yeah.
If you lined up 100 people and put them in the same situation, would they be alarmed? We have to look around ourselves and check ourselves on, if this was a thing, wouldn't everyone be worried about this? Or are there people that I trust that they've got this? They're taking care of this.
Yeah.
I got to stay in my lane. This is not a worry I need to have.
Yeah.
And so we look at things like that to try and, bring that anxiety level down.
Yeah, I really like that. And the thing with anxiety is, like, when you feel it, you feel like you are forced to make a decision. Is it sometimes good to kind of wait till your anxiety calms down and then make a big decision?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Cooler heads prevail, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When we talk about the rise of anxiety, what are some things that you're seeing within our generation that may be causing anxiety to take place in our lives?
Yeah. We look at kind of 5 main things when we're evaluating for anxiety. Sleep is a big one. We always are evaluating sleep, and people are getting less of it.
Yeah.
And lower quality. You have to regulate your sleep. Whatever that, however we can work on someone's sleep hygiene. Eating, where, there's a lot of kids that aren't getting the nutrition that they need, certainly protein. Kids come to college maybe, and they're eating a lot of mac and cheese. They're eating a lot of Doritos, whatever it might be, and they're not getting really good protein. And that's essential to kind of ward off anxiety and depression. So we look at what they're eating, what they're sleeping. Exercise usually isn't as big a deal for young people, but sometimes it is. And then we look at screen time. And boy, that's been, based on frequency, intensity, and duration. So how much they're using, how intensely, that absolutely correlates with anxiety and depression and anger. And so we see changes when there's excessive screen time on the cognitive level, social, and psychological. So on cognitive, we might see decreased attention, decreased impulse control, focus, that kind of thing. On the social, we might see a lack of skills in kind of social reciprocity, asking others how they are, being able to kind of converse. Certainly lack of empathy. We see lack of empathy. Psychological side, we see anxiety, we see depression, we see anger issues. Yeah. So, for parents, they have to really look at, the telltale sign is when you try to take the device away and your child goes into an anxious loop or panics. That's when you're in hot lava. That's when your kid needs some help. You're bordering on addiction or addicted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those were all great points. So we touched on sleep, eating, exercise, screen time.
Yeah.
Was there a fifth one?
Physical touch.
Physical touch.
Thank you. Yeah. And, that's why therapists always talk about the family dinner. Having someone, sitting with someone in close proximity, looking at them, talking to them, hugging and touching, those kinds of things produce oxytocin. They help a kid feel safe and held, and that just decreases anxiety.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so when we talked last week about some of these things, and you just really gave me some great tips on how to improve that. And I know sometimes it gets tricky for parents trying to make sure all these areas of their kids' lives, and same with college students, we have so many things. How can we balance all of these things of like making sure we're actually prioritizing our health?
Yeah, well, and sleep is hard, if you have an exam, that kind of thing. So we do the best we can with sleeping, with eating. You're walking a long way to a dining hall or you can afford food or whatever it might be. So we do the best we can with those main big areas. But we can also teach a lot of coping skills too. When anxiety hits, rather than quickly trying to pacify the need, we can challenge the need. We can encourage resilience. We can have faith in our children's ability to be uncomfortable.
Yeah. And kind of just like enforcing that self-talk, because I know something that would really give me anxiety is one of my classes. It was accounting. Shout out to the accounting department. I had an accounting class, and it was like almost every time I sat in there, I could just feel the anxiety coming up. And so later throughout the semester, I kind of just had to like work on my self-talk. Like, it's okay if I don't know all the answers. It's okay. What are some recommendations that you have on improving that self-talk? How can we talk ourselves out of anxiety? Is that possible?
Absolutely. I mean, the reason you were able to do that is because you had people in your life saying, you got this, you're okay, go on, you can do it, you're going to be fine. So we need to really be in our children's lives enough that they hear that.
And so that definitely brings up a good point of your mental health as a child, and sometimes how you bring your childhood trauma into adulthood. What are some ways to kind of combat that? I know therapy is a really good thing to kind of go through some of that childhood trauma, but what other ways can you suggest for maybe like college students who have things from their childhood and it's taking up too much space?
Yeah. I mean, we all have things from our childhood, right? There's no one right way, and trauma is one of those big words, right? So, if there's severe and profound trauma, that's a lot to unpack. If we, but for the vast majority of people, they can look at their issues and say, what kind of woman do I want to be? What kind of man do I want to be?
Yeah.
If you look at your parents' relationships and you admire them and want to emulate them, you're really lucky. But if they're not what you want for yourself, then you need to learn a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And the glorious thing about, being a college student or just the internet is there is an abundance of information.
Mm-hmm.
So being really intentional about who you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
How do I want my life to look? Instead of just kind of going with emotions and going with what comes naturally.
Yeah.
If that's not the life you want, then what comes naturally, you're going to have to retrain and relearn. And people can do that and be empowered to do that.
Yeah, for sure. So you kind of mentioned those relationships that we see when we get older. So could you talk a little bit about relationships, whether that's platonic or romantic? How do those relationships affect our anxiety? And also, how does our anxiety affect those relationships?
Well, anxiety affects relationships in a big way because it's exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
To be in a relationship with someone who's highly anxious is really hard. It's really difficult. And, sometimes people feel like they're missing out on things. It's a stressor, which only drives the anxiety up more. So certainly in romantic and loving relationships and friendships too, we have to be really careful about what we ask of our partners, right, and our friends. Now, on the other side of that, relationships can, hopefully bring out the best in us, encourage our resilience, having faith in each other. Relationships can be really healing because what we all crave and what is at the root of a lot of anxiety is feeling accepted, feeling like someone you don't have to do anything else but be you. We want to be safe. We want to be accepted. We want to be free. We just want to be, ourselves and have that be enough.
Yeah.
Right? And healthy relationships, that's what they give us. In unhealthy relationships, when we're not getting our needs met, those are hurdles to jump. And you got to know when there's too many hurdles, when this isn't serving me anymore. And it takes a lot of bravery.
Yeah, for sure. So you talked about also in relationships of being an individual, and I think that's really important too. Can you remind me of the quote about the temple?
Yeah, it's Gibran says, the pillars of the temple stand apart.
Yeah.
So, if you think of your relationship like a temple, there's got to be two, distinct pillars.
Yeah.
And if there's only one, and you're trying to glob onto that, it's not sustainable. In every relationship, certainly people have different territories, but there needs to be a sense of equality and mutual respect. And that's, in this country, that's what freedom means. That's what, women have worked decades, to earn. And that's something definitely worth fighting for.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's always a really interesting topic about how that shows up in our relationships. So moving in, we got a couple more questions here. What are some coping strategies that you recommend? So this can be for pretty much like any age. How can we get through anxiety?
Yeah. So, with severe anxiety, these likely won't work. But just what you're kind of talking about, accounting class anxiety, we always start with the breath. We want our heart rate to kind of slow, right? So some people will even say, put your hand on your heart. But we want to start with the breath, right? So we breathe the 4s, up 4, hold 4, down 4, wait 4. And that belly breathing. And that's a muscle, too, that it takes a while to kind of learn to breathe out. Like there's a balloon in your lower belly, and to kind of learn that belly breathing. So we always start with the breath.
Okay.
Water is kind of a universal anxiety reliever. So we can sip hot, we can chug cold, we can splash it on our face, we can wash our hands, but getting to water.
Yeah.
And getting to a mirror also helps us. So think of like the Inside Out movie, if you're staring at your own eyes, it kind of wakes up that wise self.
Yeah.
Kind of wakes up our wiser self, our thinking part that can say, calm down.
Yeah.
It's okay. We talk about finding your feet, like where are my feet? Where am I? Evaluating ourselves. Am I uncomfortable or am I unsafe?
Yeah.
We talk about scaling is a really good one. Scale of 1 to 10. Am I in danger right now? no, I'm just sitting in a class that makes me feel inadequate.
Yeah, exactly.
I will get through this, right? So my body, may feel like, the alarms are going off.
Yeah.
But, so it's activating that thinking part of the brain in as much as we can. Distractions obviously will shake some people out of it.
Yeah.
So anything, sometimes in more moderate anxiety, we'll talk about, to shake yourself out of it, do something nice for someone.
Yeah, that's good.
Right? Because it gives us a little dopamine. It activates that. Hug someone for at least 20 seconds. That gives us that oxytocin release. So we kind of look at these brain chemicals and say, how can I just kind of get my boost?
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned going to distractions, and obviously we want to make sure that we're going to healthy coping mechanisms, because there are definitely unhealthy coping mechanisms such as substance abuse and things like that. One thing that I really do try to be mindful of is during those moments of anxiety, not going to social media to scroll. Can you talk about what that does to our brain?
Yeah. So it affects a part of our brain. It stimulates a part of our brain that increases anxiety. So, it is a distraction. It can totally take our mind off things. But if we do it too long, depending on who you read, 15, 20 minutes is kind of the max. You do it too long, there's an adverse effect because your brain it's like a Hot Wheels car, it keeps going after you're done, and it's stimming on that social media. So much better to call a friend and be distracted, much better to kind of, clear your head rather than fixate on one thing for a long period of time.
Yeah, and when it comes to like reels, we're scrolling and every couple seconds it's something new. Yeah. And then sometimes it's like this false sense of like perfection on your phone. Like, my problems are too much, let me just go to social media. So yeah, being mindful about that, I've noticed, has really been good. Like, take that walk, get some fresh air, things like that. Yeah. So one last question, as I think about anxiety and how I've even seen it kind of increase and the conversation get bigger throughout my time frame, I'm interested to know, what will things be like in the next 10 years, around the time when I'm having kids? What are some of the things that like I should be prepared for?
Yeah. I'm no prophet, but if we can get beyond the era where we're normalizing deceit, we're normalizing cruelty, divisiveness, that drives anxiety up for everyone. And if we can get beyond that, if we can, move to a place where people do feel accepted and safe and free, that will naturally lower the collective anxiety. My hope and my prayer is that we don't go backwards. Yeah. That we go forward and we move beyond this divisive time to a place where people can once again kind of feel a sense of ease.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's so important that we do take time for our mental health and get ourselves together so it doesn't continue to poison future generations to come. Yeah. Are there any other resources or any other feedback that you like to give the audience before we close today?
I think we need to, I mentioned this earlier, but really evaluate the effects of machines in your world and your relationships. Are they serving you or not? Yeah. You mentioned getting outside. There's so much data on getting outside. With kids, there's an effort to try and, get outside 1,000 hours a year. Get your kid outside 1,000. I read a statistic recently that American children spend 94 to 97% of their time indoors. So getting outside, and, we're lucky in Michigan. There's very few days where we can't be outside. It's oppressively hot just a little bit in the summer and oppressively cold just a little bit in the winter. But all those other 11 months out of the year, we can get outside. So that's definitely a good one. And then just to kind of be there for each other and show up for each other as much as we can. So yeah.
I hope that you got something out of this episode. I know that I did. And so Hope that you're able to take these tips. Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. We'll see you the next time.